Part 17. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 162. When Rudolph brought back the medicine, the director of the orphanage was very happy. She thought that Rudolph and Ivan came to inspect the orphanage with Miss Ivy's letter of introduction, but Ivan helped take care of the children all day, and when Rudolph came back, he brought valuable medicine. The director had a headache every time he went to the Thor Mining Company to apply for funding. Although Miss Ivy, the third daughter of the Thor family, supported the orphanage, the funding was always delayed when Miss Ivy was not in Gazetown. Only when the leaders of Thor Mining came to inspect the orphanage and take pictures could she apply for funding more easily. The medicines that Mr. Rudolph brought back were enough for the orphanage to survive this winter. In the evening, Rudolph waited for Ivan, who was still reluctant to leave, at the door. "Ivan, do you like the orphanage?" "Yes, I like it very much," Ivan said as she rolled down her sleeves. "Since I stopped being a patrolman, I don't know what I should do, but I feel very fulfilled in the orphanage. I taught them to read and work as women, and I even briefly told them about the farm. Maybe they can be farmers when they grow up. I like to see their hopeful eyes, as if they can live a very good life after growing up in the orphanage." Ivan became happier and happier, and began to talk to Rudolph about the details of every day. After listening for a while, Rudolph asked a more realistic question. "Has the director of the orphanage ever thought about whether the orphanage can have some means of generating income, instead of relying entirely on the grant from Thor Mining Company?" "Yes, the director has been doing two things. The first thing is to seek funding from other groups or individuals. It is somewhat dangerous to pin hopes only on Thor Mining. We should increase publicity for the orphanage and reduce the ties to Thor Mining. The second thing is to set a return work period. Every child raised by the orphanage needs to work for the orphanage for 3 years and give part of their salary for the first 3 years to the orphanage. The oldest child in the orphanage is now 15 years old. The director is going to let him go to work, and the job is also arranged by Thor Mining Company. Soon, he will go to work in the iron mine of Thor Mining Company." A few days later, Ivan came to the orphanage and saw 15-year-old Hadley waiting for the director at the door. Today, Hadley wore his best clothes and stood straight with joy. "Hadley, are you going to work?" "Yes, Miss Ivan." Hadley had a good impression of the kind lady who had just come to the orphanage. He said, "I'm waiting for the director. The director said that Mr. Vanya will take me to the mining company." Rudolph wanted to move around the town, so he found a new name for himself, Vanya. "Work hard, other children will follow your example." "I will definitely work hard, Miss Ivan." Rudolph took Hadley to the iron mine. He had a letter of recommendation from the director of the orphanage in his hand, and the mine would directly accept Hadley. That night, Hadley lived in the iron mine. He thought he would be assigned a bed first, at least a place to sleep, but he didn't expect that he would be assigned a backpack first. Hadley, who had eaten something casually in the canteen of the iron mine, went down to the mine to work a night shift without any transition. This was very fresh. He was still in the orphanage in the morning and went down to the mine at night. He swung his pickaxe very hard, and he didn't feel tired when running, and his legs were full of strength. Half a month later, it was the day for the mine to pay wages. Hadley was queuing in the team. Although his face and body were dirty, it was hard to hide the brightness in his eyes. After paying wages, the mine would give a day off as usual. Hadley was very excited when he thought about going back to the orphanage, or going back to the orphanage with money. Hadley, work for 17 days, basic salary plus mine subsidy, a total of 1 silver shield and 60 copper shields. Hadley wiped the sweat from his palms on his clothes and took his salary. After Hadley went back to wash up, he hurried to the orphanage. When he entered the orphanage with the meat and biscuits he bought and his other clean miner's clothes, all the children surrounded him. When watching the other younger children share biscuits, Hadley felt an incomparable sense of accomplishment. Then he chatted with the director and Miss Yvonne like an adult. I don't know if it was because of excitement, but he was panting and coughing when he spoke. A week later, the younger children in the orphanage began to cough one after another. Rudolf had not monitored any valuable new intelligence in the Baron's castle these days, so he did not go to the castle today, but took the 3 children with the most severe coughs to see a doctor. The first person he thought of was Dr. Doolittle, who could perform spinal surgery. Dr. Doolittle's medical skills must be very advanced. The 3 children were examined by Dr. Doolittle one by one, and Dr. Doolittle put down his stethoscope. Tuberculosis, a highly contagious tuberculosis. These children are not in good health and have low resistance, so the symptoms are somewhat obvious. Tuberculosis, Rudolf suddenly remembered the miner Otto. Are there many tuberculosis among the miners of Thor Mining Company? Dr. Doolittle nodded, yes, many miners have tuberculosis. Rudolf took away several children with tuberculosis and medicine, but he knew that tuberculosis was not so easy to treat. After settling several children, Rudolf also headed towards the mining area. He needs to bring Hadley back and let Hadley receive treatment as soon as possible. Hadley infected other children. As the dean said, the children in the workhouse are children with families. Hadley should not have allowed his tuberculosis to get worse in a dusty environment. In the reception room of the iron mine, Rudolf met the dirty Hadley. Hadley, let's go, come with me for treatment. I'm not going. Hadley's eyes were firm. He didn't want to leave the mine. Rudolf asked, why? My wages will be deducted. Hearing this answer, Rudolf couldn't help but shake his head. Health is more important. If you are cured of your disease, you can work for a long time. If you can't be cured, then maybe you will lie down completely in a few years. For some people, health is more important, but for me, money is more important than health. Hadley said firmly, I need money, I made a mistake, and I know I passed on tuberculosis to other children. I want to make money to pay their medical bills. Rudolf shook his head, you don't have to worry about the medical expenses. I will find a way. It's my fault, I must be the one to find a solution. Seeing the stubborn Hadley, Rudolf had no choice. Hadley was anxious to get to work, so he just took Rudolf's cough medicine and left the reception room. Rudolf had nothing to do with the stubborn Hadley. When he was about to leave, he saw Dr. Doolittle from the window of the reception room. Rudolf thought of the ragged words again. The seriously injured cavalryman and the miner's disease, other people's injuries and disease, my desert. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 163. Dr. Doolittle also entered the reception room of the iron mine with a medical kit in hand. Didn't expect to see you here, Dr. Doolittle. Doolittle was also surprised when he saw Rudolf. This gentleman from the almshouse doesn't know your name yet. Vanya. Hello, Mr. Vanya. I am here to treat some miners I know. Dr. Doolittle opened the medicine box and waited for the miner he knew to come over. Rudolf saw 2 pairs of dust masks in the box. After noticing Rudolf's gaze, Dr. Doolittle came to explain. I've been selling my dust masks to toll mining for a few years. Working in iron mines can easily lead to lung disease, silicosis, tuberculosis, and even lung cancer due to various dusts. It would be much better if you have a dust mask. But unfortunately, for 2 or 3 years, the people of Thor Mining Company have always believed that these dust masks are useless. They will directly clear out the miners who attach equal importance to them. Anyway, there are many people who want to make money in the iron mines. Rudolf understood, dust masks are an unnecessary burden for the iron ore, so they are not willing to pay for them, are they? Yes. Rudolf asked, Dr. Doolittle, is tuberculosis in the mines more serious now? The young people in the almshouse who have just entered the iron mines have already contracted tuberculosis. After sighing, Dr. Doolittle said, yes, it is very serious. I don't know if the mining company will take this matter seriously. Rudolph left the reception room. He had nothing to do with him and he shouldn't stay longer. He looked around and saw a few infected mice. That night, Rudolph did not return to the almshouse, but hid among the rocks outside the iron mine. He always had a feeling that this tuberculosis infection was not simple. After dark, rats roamed around the iron mines. There are night shifts in iron ore, and mining is still going on at night. Miner Otto coughed as he headed to his post. His job tonight is to be on duty in the ventilator room. The iron ore on the surface of Gasei town was mined decades ago, and the ores now mined are all iron ores that require digging wells. The mines need to be ventilated, otherwise the workers won't be able to stay long. Otto entered the machine room and took a nap around the fans. Just listen to the sound of the fan. If the fan fails and the huge noise suddenly disappears, you will quickly find out that there is something wrong with the fan. In Otto's hand, there was also a small spray bottle, only as high as the palm of his hand. It was a medicinal mist to relieve the pain in his throat. It was getting later and later, and another person in the duty room fell asleep. Otto opened his eyes and came to the air inlet. The fan will continuously send the fresh air around the air inlet into the mine through the pipe. He raised the sprayer and sprayed a few wisps of mist toward the air inlet. A mouse saw it all. What kind of chemical mist needs to be sent into the mine through the air duct? An hour later, a figure appeared at the door of the duty room. He entered the duty room directly without knocking. Otto stood up from his chair. "Who are you?" The person swung his cane and hit the other officer on duty lightly on the back of the head, causing him to faint. "Give me your nebulizer." Otto's eyes flickered. How did this man find the sprayer? Otto touched a shovel next to him and threw it at Rudolph. Rudolph's brows tingled, and his dangerous instinct told him that someone could threaten his life. Otto is just a sickly ordinary person. His shovel is weak and cannot threaten Rudolph at all. Rudolph quickly retreated out of the house. Just as he was hiding to the side of the house, he heard the sound of a sharp instrument piercing the wooden door. The silver light, if I saw it correctly, was a scalpel nailed to the wooden door. After Rudolph came outside, he didn't panic. He was safe here. The worst he could do was spread his bat wings and fly away. Two figures walked out from the side of the duty cabin. "Dr. Doolittle, I didn't expect us to meet again." The person next to Otto is Dr. Doolittle. Doolittle still had his case in hand, and it was clear that his plan to sell the dust mask had failed again. Doolittle was still holding a scalpel gently in his hand. "What are you going to do, Mr. Vanya?" This sentence should be my question to you, Dr. Doolittle. What are you going to do? If I guess correctly, what Otto sprayed into the air inlet is not a simple humidifier or something, right? Vanya, I advise you not to meddle in other people's business. The affairs of the Thor iron mine are not the business of an outsider like you. You think too much. I don't care about your affairs at all. No matter what you do in the Thor family's iron mine, I won't give it a second glance. You just demolished the office buildings of Thor Mining Company. No, I won't ask. However, what you did affected the workhouse. There was a young man named Hadley in the almshouse who contracted tuberculosis just after he started working in the iron mines. He also unfortunately passed tuberculosis to other children in the workhouse. This affects me, so it's not nosy. I suspect that tuberculosis is an infectious disease created by someone. Dr. Doolittle said coldly. The almshouse is just a way for the Thor family to gain fame. They promote a little charity to cover up their greater evil. Do you know how many people die from lung disease every year in the iron mines? It is an exaggerated number of more than 50 people. If the Thor family had a little conscience and could provide better protection for their employees, there would not be so many poor people like Otto. You are wrong. Tuberculosis is not an infectious disease created by me. I just made the already serious tuberculosis spread a little faster. This matter must be so big that it affects the operation of Thor Mining Company, and those senior executives will pay attention to it. They can make profits from iron ore, but they cannot trample on the lives of miners. In my opinion, alchemists are the most vicious apostles in the world. They can do anything for cheap raw materials. Dr. Dolittle glanced at Otto while speaking. These words were very useful to Otto. Otto suddenly became excited and shouted to Rudolf. "What do you know? This is our only chance, the only chance to negotiate with the senior executives of Thor Mining. Only if we fight, the miners in the future will not die one by one because of lung disease." Otto coughed up blood because he was too excited. Rudolf looked at the dark red blood in the dark night and didn't know what to say. Someone was coming in the distance, and Rudolf just said, "Heal Hadley and the children in the orphanage, otherwise, I will find you, Dolittle." Rudolf quickly disappeared in the rocks in the distance. Dolittle looked at Rudolf's figure going away and pondered. It will be soon. As long as he relies on this epidemic to get promoted, he will no longer be afraid of anyone's threats. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 164. A few days later, Rudolf went to the iron mine to pick up Hadley, because someone from the iron mine said that Hadley's illness was very serious. There are bunk beds everywhere in the 30-person miner's dormitory, which is filled with the stench of sweat. When Rudolf found Hadley, Hadley was lying on the second bunk. Hadley was pale, covered with a quilt, and coughing continuously. Rudolf took out the medicine sent by the nurse at Dolittle Clinic and handed it to Hadley's mouth. "Mr. Vanya." Hadley raised his heavy eyelids and swallowed the pills without water. Rudolf said, "When you feel better, come back to the almshouse with me first. I will pass it on to my other younger siblings. It's okay. I've already made an agreement with Dr. Dolittle. He will cure you and others in the almshouse." Hadley stopped talking, turned away from Rudolf, and cried silently. This was not the result he wanted. He wanted to work well and give more money to the poorhouse. After waiting for an hour, after Hadley's fever got better, he followed Rudolf and left the mine. There is a carriage at the gate of the iron mine, which Rudolf rented temporarily. Rudolf set up the carriage and took Hadley towards the town. I met many people walking staggeringly on the road. They were all miners who had to go home temporarily because of lung disease. The almshouse prepared a separate room for Hadley, and Rudolf delivered medicine to Hadley. Both Rudolf and Ivan are in good health, and these infectious diseases will have little impact on him for the time being. With the help of Dolittle's medication, Hadley's condition was under control, but it was not completely cured. Rudolf cursed Dolittle. He also knew now that Dolittle didn't want to cure the people in the almshouse at all, he just wanted to delay time. Now it seemed that it was foolish to place hope on Dolittle's conscience, but Rudolf didn't know how to treat a doctor, so there was no other good way. Not only did the almshouse fall into the quagmire of tuberculosis, there were more and more patients in the entire town of Guess. The situation became increasingly serious, and after a few days, Rudolf finally received a reply. He wrote to Ivy asking for help, and the reply arrived at this time. Rudolf used a special technique and the letter had a very light imprint of the Relief Society emblem. The font of the reply letter was very elegant. In the letter, Ivy introduced a way to be promoted as an apostle. The plague agent, the apostle Rudolf had never seen. The promotion of plague vector requires the creation of an infectious disease. In the spread of infectious diseases, vectors gradually accumulate the power of vectors. In the subsequent process of treating infectious diseases, the plague vector will break through its own level at a certain moment. If nothing else, Dr. Dolittle is the plague vector. Dissemination and treatment are indispensable. This is why Rudolph believes that Doolittle will have a specific drug for tuberculosis. The medicine Doolittle gave to Rudolph only relieved the symptoms but could not eradicate the disease. He did this on purpose. Rudolph closed the letter, feeling a little headache. He hadn't yet investigated Baron Hakim's power, and now he encountered the plague broker first. Groups of miners marching suddenly appeared on the streets of Gasser town. Rudolph stood on the side of the street and watched the miners holding signs and flags and shouting slogans as they walked towards the toll mining building. The miners left the mines and returned to town, forcing concessions from the toll mining company. They want higher salaries and better working conditions. The crowd left, and Rudolph made up his mind that he must cut through the mess quickly, otherwise things would get worse. Late at night, in the Doolittle clinic, Rudolph stood in front of Doolittle. The smell of disinfectant still filled the clinic. Rudolph's face looked very ugly. "I need you to come up with the medicine that can really cure tuberculosis. The medicine I gave to the almshouse is already the best medicine." No, Rudolph shook his head. If a plague agent wants to be promoted, both dissemination and treatment are indispensable. If it were just those medicines, it would be impossible for you to complete the treatment process. Give me medicine that actually cures my illness. Ha ha, ha ha. Doolittle put down his glasses, stopped writing medical orders, and looked at Rudolph as if he were a fool. "Why are you, a foreigner, asking for this and that for a workhouse? I've told you a long time ago that the almshouse is just a false brand used by the Thor family to hide their shame. Why don't you understand? It is true that some people have died due to tuberculosis in the past few days, but compared with the miners who died in Thor mining, this number is nothing. Didn't you see that the miners have started negotiations with Thor mining? This is the greatest progress. Thor mining is the source of all lung diseases. At best, I can only take advantage of the evil done by Thor mining. Why don't you keep an eye on Thor mining? That's the biggest evil, don't you? Don't you dare? Compared with Thor mining, and those black-hearted alchemists who do anything to get cheap raw materials, what does this mean to me?" Rudolph shook his head again. "I don't care what the original intention of the almshouse was, I don't care who profits from it. The director of the almshouse is a woman whom I respect. She is now lying in bed and cannot get off the ground. The children in the workhouse are all good and obedient children. They live in almshouses and regard almshouses as hope. I am willing to do something for the almshouses. I know you have medicine. You are in danger." Doolittle stared into Rudolph's eyes. "From the first moment I laid eyes on you, I knew you were dangerous. To be honest with you, I cannot precisely control the spread of tuberculosis, but when I learned that Hadley was infected with tuberculosis, I was very happy that I could restrain dangerous elements like you. I didn't expect that a fool like you with an excessive sense of justice would ruin my business." The conversation was out of place. Rudolph gently raised his cane, and Doolittle pushed his glasses. Almost at the same time, they both said a few words in surprise. When? What surprised Doolittle was the sudden surge of toxins in his body. Behind him, the smell of disinfectant covered the faint smell of blood, and a bloodbath exploded beside Doolittle. Along with the toxins came paralysis and heat. Paralysis was a toxin, which Doolittle understood very well, but his skin suddenly turned red and purple, as if it was burning. Doolittle suddenly clenched his teeth and crushed a capsule in his mouth. The toxins in his body disappeared instantly. Rudolph's eyelids were very heavy at this time. He didn't know when he was infected with the plague. With his physique, he felt like he had a severe cold, with pain all over his body and a sudden rise in body temperature. This was the first time Rudolph faced a plague carrier. Suddenly, the plague carrier gave him the plague was planted on the ground. When was it? Was it the medicine sent by the nurse, or something else? Was it the smell of medicine that always filled the clinic? What surprised Rudolph even more was that the red and purple on Doolittle's skin not only did not turn into purple flames, but also disappeared quickly. Doolittle actually detoxified his Scorpio toxin. This was the first time his Scorpio toxin failed. Although Doolittle looks miserable now, with blisters on his skin after burning, Rudolph can no longer sense Scorpio toxin in Doolittle's body. A syringe suddenly appeared in Doolittle's hand and pierced his left arm. The syringe contained an unknown potion, which was pushed into Doolittle's arm. Doolittle breathed a sigh of relief. Scorpio wizard. You are a Scorpio wizard. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 165. In this small clinic, Rudolph's steps were weak, his vision was blurred, he staggered back, and fell heavily into a waiting chair, confused and with a splitting headache. It didn't seem to be a serious illness, and all the symptoms were just like dry and full, but he never thought that a cold could be so serious. Every time he breathed, hot air came out of his nostrils. Accompanied by a high fever, there was a violent cough. Rudolph's throat and trachea were like pepper powder sprinkled in them, and the continuous coughing even made his abdominal muscles ache. In sharp contrast to Rudolph, Doolittle looked miserable, with burn marks on his face and hands, but he was in very good condition because the toxins had been cleared by him. Just like the high priest restrained the word spirit, Rudolph knew that the plague carrier could restrain the Scorpio wizard so much. The Scorpio toxin that Rudolph was proud of was quickly removed by the plague carrier. There are many air outlets on the ceiling of the clinic, and a lot of light green mist suddenly emerged from these air outlets. As the mist descended, Doolittle's injuries were slowly recovering. And Rudolph tried his best to hold his breath, not daring to inhale a little green mist. Even when coughing, Rudolph did not open his mouth, which made him tremble. How lucky you are that you are a Scorpio wizard. If it were another wizard, I might really have no good way. Dr. Doolittle stood up from the chair, and his injuries had almost recovered. The burned skin is now a new pink skin. Scorpio wizard, I have long wanted to meet a Scorpio wizard to verify what the plague medium's restraint on Scorpio wizards is like. Doolittle stared at Rudolph. Now I finally know that Scorpio toxin tastes like this. A scalpel slipped from Doolittle's sleeve. I think you are ill. Let me take you to the operating room for a thorough examination. Check how many magic weapons you have on you. Only a careful dissection can find all your collections. Doolittle walked towards Rudolph, and the scalpel in his hand flashed coldly under the light. Rudolph narrowed his eyes and waited. Just after Doolittle took 3 steps forward, he suddenly felt a pain in his heart. He looked down at his heart and found a black and red bloodline piercing his chest. Doolittle's face was horrified. He didn't know when a person appeared silently outside the door. Rudolph had already let Vanya ambush in the darkness outside the house. Vanya, who suddenly appeared and could move silently, was the best candidate for a sneak attack. Vanya walked in, and another bloodline shot out from his hand. The second bloodline was so flexible that it pierced Doolittle's wrist at an arc angle. Doolittle did not die immediately. The plague carrier can adjust the hormones in his body at any time. Under a large amount of adrenaline, he became more excited. The blood in Doolittle's body was flowing uncontrollably into the bloodline. However, this was exactly what Doolittle wanted. Vanya's bloodline changed from black and red to green. Obviously, Doolittle added something to his own blood. With Vanya's delay, Rudolph finally breathed a sigh of relief. He raised his cane lightly, and a purple beam shot out from the cane, directly hitting Doolittle's head. Rudolph tried his best to convert the star power into erosion rays through the erosion light beads. In such a short distance, Doolittle, who was pierced by Vanya, could not avoid it at all. He could resist the scorpion toxin and pierce the heart without dying. He couldn't even resist the level 2 erosion beam, right? Under the erosion beam, the power of the plague carrier on Doolittle quickly disappeared. The green mist around him faded, first whitish, and finally transparent. Rudolph's severe symptoms also eased, and his body temperature gradually dropped, making him less uncomfortable. Vanya's bloodline also returned to normal from dark green. Soon, Doolittle died in front of Rudolph. The two previously contaminated bloodlines were disconnected, and Vanya gave up these two bloodlines. Rudolph was dizzy, and he rested in his seat for several minutes before he had the strength to stand up. If he hadn't been so many tricks, if he hadn't ambushed Vanya in advance, if he was just an ordinary Scorpio wizard, he would be dead now. Rudolph walked to Doolittle's side, and there were two places on Doolittle's body that were glowing with starlight. One was the scalpel in his hand, which was his relic. The second starlight was in his arms, and Rudolph touched it and found that it was a palm-sized sprayer. The two relics disappeared in Rudolph's hands. After putting on his hat, Rudolph left the clinic. It was late at night, and there was no one on the streets of Gasser. After a long time, a big fire broke out in Doolittle's clinic. After the fire, Vanya also disappeared in the night. At this time, at the other end of Fabreau City, in the Red Church of Lehman Town, the word Spirit Larry was doing divination. There is a result. I don't know what agreement the Blood Clan and the people of the Trial Bureau have reached. The word Spirit Larry is helping the Blood Clan to divine Vanya. Larry was very happy that his work finally had results and he didn't have to do divination every night. Not far from Larry, there was a tall female Blood Clan. Frosty skin, bare shoulders, and a one-line skirt hanging on her high and bulging chest. The skirt has no extra decorative lines, and the tail is very long, floating more than 10 centimeters above the ground, revealing her high heels and smooth ankles. Larry said, "High Priest Hera, Vanya has appeared again. His location is, in the north, according to the distance, it is about the location of Gazay Town." The vampire named Hera nodded and said, "Next, go to Gazay Town." Rudolph felt much freer when he came to the suburbs. He closed his eyes and looked into his mind. The level 2 relic scalpel lit up the star Upsilon Pisces, and the progress of Pisces reached 2/15. 3 suspended stars fell from the star Upsilon Pisces. Level 2 hemostasis, Level 2 bone setting, Level 2 plague doctor scalpel. From these rewards, it can be seen that the plague carrier usually masters a lot of medical skills. Rudolph doesn't need Level 2 hemostasis and Level 2 bone setting. The third reward, the introduction of the plague doctor's scalpel, made Rudolph very interested. There is no corpse that cannot be cut open by the scalpel. This means that this scalpel is extremely sharp, has extreme cutting power, and it is small enough and very hidden. Rudolph drew the Great Triangle of Stars and placed the scalpel in the circle of the Great Triangle of Stars. He looked up at the starry sky, his eyes falling on the star field of Sagittarius in the starry sky. The centaur held a bow and arrow, and the sharp arrows represented tearing and piercing. The witch language used this time was the witch language of Sagittarius, sharp. The star power of Sagittarius instantly penetrated the long space and fell directly on Rudolph's head. The sharp star power passed through Rudolph, entered the great triangle of image under his feet, and also entered the relic scalpel. After the ceremony, Rudolph got another level 2 witch weapon. Rudolph first took the scalpel and tried to scratch the stone on the ground. It was sharp enough and it was very easy to leave a few centimeters deep wound on the stone. This witch weapon was put into Rudolph's sleeve and could be delivered to his hand at any time when needed. Rudolph looked at the star map again, and there was another relic, the sprayer. Since Doolittle is unwilling to give the medicine and Rudolph doesn't want to see the children in the orphanage die, it doesn't make sense to talk to him. The simplest way is to make Doolittle into a witch weapon, and a witch weapon will not refuse Rudolph's request. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 166. Doolittle's Level 2 relic sprayer lit up the Pisces Phi star, and the progress of Pisces reached 3/15. 3 suspended stars rose and fell on the ground of the star map. Level 2 flu spell, Level 2 pulmonary disease aggravation spell, Level 2 plague doctor sprayer. Rudolph looked at the first two rewards and suddenly felt that the apostle of the plague mediator had a lot of similarities with the Scorpio wizard. Flu spell and pulmonary disease aggravation are similar to some viruses transformed by the power of the plague mediator, which can make the enemy sick in a short time. Just like when Rudolph was infected, he was sitting in the waiting chair of the clinic and couldn't move. The hot air he exhaled could curl his beard and almost burned him to lose consciousness. These two spells are very powerful, but it is more troublesome to release them. Rudolph's identity is not a doctor, and the release of poison is not concealed enough. The actual combat effect of these two spells is questionable. Some apostles are very different between the two levels. The physical constitution of the level 2 werewolf and the level 1 werewolf is very different, and the same is true for the knight and the giant. Rudolph would not want to challenge these apostles with more comprehensive qualities. However, the plague mediator, silver snake, etc., their promotion will not improve their physical fitness, and the level 3 plague mediator may also be defeated by the level 2 wizard. The abilities of these apostles are more bizarre and more difficult to defend, but they also require more preparation. At least Rudolph can't figure out how to easily release these viruses. The effects of these two spells also overlap with Scorpio toxin, so Rudolph doesn't need them much. And the third option, the Plague Doctor Sprayer, this magic weapon has two functions. The first function is that it can treat almost all respiratory diseases and relieve many other symptoms. This is exactly what Rudolph urgently needs now. A large area of the relief hospital collapsed, and a powerful magic weapon is needed to treat their serious lung disease. The second function, the medicine sprayed by the sprayer, has the function of promoting the regeneration of human tissue. After Doolittle was burned by the purple flower fire, the green medicine mist filled his side, allowing his injuries to heal quickly. The cells that were burned to death can actually be revitalized again. Unlike the wolf poison potion, the effect of the wolf poison potion is to quickly heal the torn wound, while the rebirth of the medicine mist is to regenerate the necrotic tissue. The wolf poison potion is good at treating severe trauma, while the plague spray is good at treating chronic injuries. More importantly, this magic weapon uses the magic language that Rudolph urgently needs, the magic language of the third fire sign Aries. At the level 2 wizard stage, Rudolph only has the last fire sign, Aries, to learn. It is now April, the Aries month in the wizard month. If Rudolph cannot learn the magic language of this constellation this month, he will have to wait until next year. It's terrible. As the protagonist, how can he not make progress for a whole year? After drawing a large astrological triangle, Rudolph placed the sprayer in the circle of the large triangle. The star power of Aries fell from the starry sky and entered Rudolph's body. When the sun moves in Aries, it is the vernal equinox every year, and it is also the time when spring officially arrives and the 4 seasons begin again. In spring, everything is so vibrant. The sleeping brown bear wakes up from the cave, and the scattered seeds slowly sprout. Therefore, Aries also represents rebirth and opening. Aries wizard Ptolemy is the first wizard in the world. He is the first to systematically explore the way wizards are promoted, the relationship between wizard moon and witch language, and it is said that he also masters all witch languages. The Aries star power circulates in Rudolph's body. Rudolph feels that every cell is groaning comfortably, which is the feeling of hidden injuries being healed. The dry eyes become moist, and the soreness of the leg muscles disappears after standing for a long time. Faintly, Rudolph feels that his abdomen has become full, and the deficit consumed by Ivan a few days ago has been made up. It's back. Everything is back. Rudolph feels that he is full of energy now. Does this Aries star power still have this function? The next time he sees Sheriff Claude, Rudolph will ask him if he has hidden an Aries-related witch weapon. The Aries star power merged into every corner of Rudolph's body, and then reluctantly left and entered the astrological triangle under his feet. The star power roamed in the astrological triangle and finally entered the level 2 relic sprayer. The starstone powder wrapped the sprayer. After the ceremony, Rudolph received a level 2 relic, the Plague Doctor sprayer. So far, Rudolph has mastered at least one witch language of the 3 fire signs. If he encounters the right opportunity, he can plan to become a level 3 wizard. Rudolph, level 2 Scorpio wizard. Puppet. Scorpio puppet, level 2 vampire Vanya. Mastering witch language. Scorpio witch language, water phase, venom, infection, malice. Pisces witch language, water phase, entanglement, alien. Cancer witch language, water phase, containment, swallowing. Leo witch language, fire phase, flame, dazzling, expansion, magnification. Sagittarius witch language, fire phase, blast, flying, stabbing, sharp. Aries witch language, fire phase, rebirth. Witch weapon. Level 3 witch weapon, zombie teeth, side effect, body stiffness, has been neutralized by physical strength sharing contract and muscle enhancement. Level 2 witch weapon, night vision wolf pupil. Level 2 witch weapon, dangerous intuition coding. Level 2 witch weapon, gentleman cane. Level 2 white magic light bead. Level 2 pain cane. Level 2 witch weapon, bat wings. Level 2 witch weapon, plague doctor's scalpel. Level 2 witch weapon, plague doctor's sprayer. Level 1 witch weapon, pet crystal. The main material is level 3 wizard crystal. Level 1 magic weapon, endless revolver. Level 2 magic weapon, bloodline, held by puppet Vanya. Witchcraft. Level 2 poisoning technique. Level 2 bone eroding poison. Level 2 purple flower fire technique. Level 1 blood bat technique. Status. Level 2 muscle enhancement. Level 1 physical strength sharing contract, shared with level 2 werewolf. Putting the sprayer in his arms, Rudolph walked into the town. When he entered the orphanage, he found that Ivan was still taking care of the children with high fever. The director and several other nurses fell ill, so Ivan lived in the orphanage for the past 2 days, taking care of the patients one by one. Half of the people in the orphanage fell ill, which made Ivan very tired. These patients will also have a fever in the second half of the night, and Ivan has to cool them down from time to time, otherwise they will burn out. Rudolph squatted beside Ivan. Really, these children are so sick that it affects our nightlife. Let's get through this most difficult time first. I'll accompany you when they are all well. Ivan was also very tired, but she couldn't stop. Rudolph gently rubbed Ivan's tired face. Which ones are serious? Ivan was wiping a child's face and neck with alcohol. These are all serious. I think you need to have a good sleep tonight. Rudolph took out the sprayer and asked a child to open his mouth, but the child was already delirious with fever. If you don't treat it, he will almost become a fool. Children are most afraid of high fever. Don't turn the orphanage into a fool's home. Ivan gently hammered Rudolph, thinking that Rudolph shouldn't joke at this time. But the next moment, Ivan saw Rudolph pry open the child's mouth and spray some medicine mist into the child's mouth. Soon, the child's face was no longer red. Ivan touched his forehead and his body temperature was slowly dropping. What is this spray? Ivan took the sprayer in surprise. Is this the new medicine developed by Dr. Dolittle? I remember you said you were going to find Dr. Dolittle. But after getting it, Ivan found that it was a witchcraft weapon. This is not Dr. Dolittle's medicine, this is Dr. Dolittle's life. That idiot is going crazy for promotion, regardless of the lives of so many patients. More importantly, he didn't give me the medicine. If he didn't give it to me, I had to get it myself. Seeing Ivan's relaxed expression, Rudolph was in a good mood, spraying the children with medicine mist. As expected of the life essence of the level 2 plague carrier, Dolittle, who specializes in respiratory diseases, left a sprayer that worked very well after his death. The relief house was converted from a warehouse of the former Thor mining industry, so it was very high and empty. Rudolf walked among the children and looked very small. The children fell asleep peacefully. In Ivan's eyes, Rudolf became very tall. As Rudolf walked around, the coughing in the room became less and less. As long as it was daytime, the children in the orphanage would find that their high fevers were gone. Rudolf finally came to Hadley. Because Hadley was the oldest, he always asked to give good things to other children. Hadley slept closest to the outer wall. There would be cold wind blowing in here. Hadley was hot all over and wrapped tightly in a blanket. Hadley was already unconscious. If Rudolf didn't come to treat him, he might die here soon. After spraying his mouth, Rudolf left him a glass of water and left here. Hadley was a good child and shouldn't die like this. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 167. The next day, after everyone woke up, they were surprised to find that their high fever and lung disease had healed. The director of the orphanage looked for Rudolf everywhere, and heard from Ivan that Rudolf had bought special medicine. When the director found Rudolf, Rudolf was leading a few people in with breakfast. The director was even more moved when he saw it. She and the nurses had just recovered from the illness and were too weak to make breakfast, but Mr. Vanya even solved the breakfast problem. Thank you so much, Mr. Vanya, how can you be so kind? You bought special medicine and breakfast again. To be honest, I just don't want to see Ivan so tired, and I'm not so kind. I'll feel guilty if you praise me as a good person. After this lung disease, the orphanage completely accepted Rudolf and Ivan. Ivan won the recognition of everyone in the orphanage with her tireless care. Although Rudolf seems to be doing nothing all day, he has money. He buys medicine and food, and becomes the second sponsor of the orphanage. The charm of money is always so simple and direct. It is hard to say who the children of the orphanage like more, the kind-hearted Miss Ivan or Mr. Vanya who buys candy. That afternoon, Rudolf was reading a newspaper on a chair at the door of the orphanage, searching for news about the Baron's castle. Intelligence science is sometimes not about studying high-end skills such as beauty traps and bribery, but some news that is put on the surface is enough for people to infer useful information. The blacksmith shop is recruiting workers, and the Baron's castle is recruiting chefs, which proves the activity of the Baron's castle. During the pandemic, the people of the Baron's castle stayed in the castle and did not go out, and were least affected. Hadley walked out of the gate, came to the door, and said, "Sir, thank you for the medicine, I'm leaving." Rudolf didn't even put down the newspaper. "Oh, go ahead. But don't join your fellow workers' parade." Hadley was stunned. He didn't expect Mr. Vanya to guess what he wanted to do at the first time. Hadley didn't answer, but left silently. Rudolf looked at Hadley's back from above the newspaper, and didn't say much. Everyone has their own choice. He continued to read the newspaper, and occasionally looked at the pet crystal to see how prepared the Baron castle was. Footsteps sounded in the distance, and Rudolf looked up and saw that a group of people surrounded Ivy and entered the orphanage. The third lady of the Thor family, after returning to Gazay town, has become more luxurious when traveling. Ivy just looked at Rudolf and continued to walk into the orphanage without talking much to the guard. A manager next to Ivy saw that Rudolf not only did not stand up, but also only glanced at Miss Ivy above the newspaper. He immediately said to his subordinates, immediately, fire him. Before Miss Ivy comes out, I want to see a new guard at the orphanage." After the group of people entered the orphanage, a staff member of Thor Mining walked up to Rudolf and looked down at Rudolf on the chair. "You are fired." Rudolf raised his head and instantly understood something. "What? You fired a volunteer?" Can volunteers be fired? The staff member didn't waste any words. He took out 2 banknotes from his arms and shook them. The banknotes rustled. This is 2 silver shields, get out of here. Rudolph stared at the banknotes and felt that he was looked down upon. I am doing my part for the charity of Gazetown. You are not humiliating me, you are humiliating charity. The staff member took his hand back into his arms. Rudolph suddenly felt a little regretful. 2 silver shields was his previous monthly salary. What made Rudolph happy was that the staff member rummaged through his pockets and took out 2 more banknotes, 4 silver shields. Immediately, leave immediately. Can these humiliate your charity? The banknotes rubbed against each other, making a pleasant rustling sound, and Rudolph nodded happily, a fair price. Charity is worth this much, no more. This money cannot humiliate me, but it is enough to humiliate charity. Rudolph took the banknotes, put away the newspaper neatly, stood up from the chair, and pretended to leave. The staff member was also anxious to find a new guard, and did not pay much attention to him after seeing Rudolph leave. Ivy entered the poorhouse and was very satisfied with the performance of the poorhouse after learning about the situation. Under the epidemic of tuberculosis in the town, not a single child died in the poorhouse. You know, the children in the poorhouse were already weak and used to be beggars on the streets of Gazetown. Ivy praised the director of the poorhouse, and the director also introduced 2 kind people who came to inspect the poorhouse, Mr. Vanya and Ms. Ivan. Ivy guessed that Vanya should be a pseudonym that Rudolph had temporarily given up. She had seen Ivan by Rudolph's side before, and she also thanked Ivan specially. A group of people left the orphanage again under Ivy's leadership. When leaving, Ivy saw that the guard at the door was not Rudolph, and asked, "Where is the guard before?" The manager on the side was stunned, and hurried to find the subordinate who was doing the work. The subordinate was also sweating, and hurried to find the guard who was driven away by him. Miss Ivy seemed to know the guard and deliberately waited at the door, and others didn't say much. When the subordinate found Rudolph, Rudolph was watching the miners marching on the street outside. This march started in the morning. The miners went on strike today, and the sick ones went on strike, and the healthy ones also went on strike. Beside the noisy street, the subordinate said cautiously, "Sir, someone wants to see you. Go back and tell Miss Ivy that I just lost my job and I'm in a bad mood. There's no need to meet." When the subordinate heard Miss Ivy's name, he realized that they really knew each other, and hurriedly said, "You can continue to be the doorman of the orphanage, I can advance you 3 months' salary." After that, the subordinate took out 1 silver shield. Considering the income of the doorman, 1 silver shield for 3 months is not a small amount. Rudolph shook his head. "Do you think you are sending the doorman? The income of the doorman is okay, but what about my charity? Have you forgotten how much charity is?" The subordinate reluctantly took out 4 silver shields again. "That's right, anyway, it's Thor Mining's money, you can reimburse it when you go back, why are you so stingy?" Back and forth, Rudolph earned 8 silver shields for nothing, and returned to the orphanage contentedly. Ivy motioned for others to leave first. Ivy said, "Thank you for letting me know that it was the plague carrier who directed the epidemic in Gazetown." Rudolph wrote to Ivy and told her the cause of tuberculosis. "Rudolph is too busy to treat so many patients, so let Thor Mining worry about it." "You're welcome. Ivan and I like the orphanage very much. We are very busy and happy here." Ivy asked, "Why did you come here? Are you really interested in the orphanage?" Rudolph helped Ivy and Thor Mining in the matter of tuberculosis, but Ivy still felt that Rudolph should have some other purpose. "Are there no good people in the world? Believe it or not, Ivan and I really just like the orphanage." Ivy knew that the wizard in front of her would not tell her his true purpose. As long as there was no threat to Thor Mining for the time being, Ivy was not going to intervene. Ivy asked, "Where is the plague carrier?" "Oh, I solved it when I found it." Hearing this news, Ivy walked out. After the group left, Rudolph continued to read the newspaper on the chair at the door. Even if Rudolph was in the yard, he could hear the slogans on the street outside. Many miners were lying down because of lung disease, and those who did not fall down were mobilized to participate in the march. The miners' demands were simple. They wanted a better working environment, they wanted dust masks, they wanted to upgrade the ventilation system, and they wanted a better mine hospital. Half a day later, for some unknown reason, there were suddenly cries and shouts on the street. Rudolph stood at the door and looked out through the iron gate. The security guards of Thor Mining Company and the patrolmen of the police station began to clear the streets. They threatened the miners with gunshots and smashed the miners' heads with batons. Obviously, the police station in Gazay town stood on the side of Thor Mining. Just as Rudolph was looking and shaking his head through the iron gate, a miner suddenly rushed to the nearby area and shouted, "Hadley, that kid," ran slowly and was caught by the security guards of Thor Mining. Before Rudolph could ask a few more questions, the man ran away. Rudolph shook his head. Hadley left in the morning and was caught in the afternoon. Hadley must have recovered too quickly and eaten too much. Fortunately, Rudolph was only temporarily staying in the relief house in Gazay town, otherwise these naughty kids would have annoyed Rudolph to death. At night, Rudolph came to the office building of Thor Mining Company. He walked all the way to the basement. Thor Mining also liked to use the basement as a temporary prison. In the basement, Rudolph saw Hadley, who was beaten to death. Hadley had dozens of whip marks on his body, his clothes were tattered, and there were blood stains in the rips of his clothes. Rudolph took out Ivy's note that he had just received and signaled the guard to open the cell door. 2 guards went in and dragged Hadley out. The thatch and rags in the cell stuck to Hadley's wounds, but Hadley didn't even groan. Rudolph looked deep into the cell and saw several miners inside. They looked at Hadley with envy or numbness. Unexpectedly, Rudolph saw an acquaintance here, the miner Otto. His eyes were dazed, as if all this had nothing to do with him. Take a closer look, it's not his eyes that are dazed, it's dead. I don't know if he died of illness or was beaten to death. After hesitating, Rudolph did not remind the guards. Maybe tonight or tomorrow, they will find that Otto is dead. He took out 1 silver shield and handed it to the guard, then pointed to Hadley on the ground. "Do you have any medicine for wounds? Give him some." He just made 8 silver shields from Thor Mining, and returned 1 silver shield in a blink of an eye. Ill-gotten gains really can't be kept. The guard happily accepted the money and went to get the best medicine for wounds. In order not to beat prisoners to death, the prison will prepare medicine for wounds. Whipping while applying medicine for wounds is the best punishment. The guards were very skilled, and soon Hadley's wounds were bandaged. Seeing that Rudolph was wearing a decent suit, 2 guards took the initiative to carry Hadley and walked upstairs. On the first floor, Rudolph met Ivy again. Iron ore can only be mined for more than 10 years. If it were decades ago, Thor Mining would definitely improve the working environment of miners, but now, I can't convince those shareholders to agree to increase investment so much at this time. Rudolph nodded and accepted Ivy's explanation. In fact, he didn't care about it. In front of Ivy, the guards carefully put Hadley on the carriage hired by Rudolph. On the way back, Hadley was shaken by the carriage, and the pain in his body became more and more clear at this time. "Mr. Vanya, why is the mining company willing to set up a relief home but not to provide a harmless working environment for the miners?" "Hadley, you are just a small miner who has just started working, don't think too much." After watching the 2 leave, Ivy turned around and walked up to the office building. In the luxurious office on the top floor, Ivy saw her brother, Avery, who is also the manager of the Gazay town branch of Thor Mining. Avery wore a well-tailored suit and a tie even in the middle of the night. "Brother, the company has to pay for the medical expenses to help those sick miners." Avery was upset about the strike, Impossible, tuberculosis was caused by a plague carrier, that's what you said. We can't pay so much medical expenses for the crimes of the plague carrier. If the miners' working environment is not too bad, they can't be used by the plague carrier. Avery shook his head. Ivy, you stay with Vice Speaker Abel and be a bridge between Vice Speaker Abel and the family. This is your job. The iron mine is not something you should be involved in. I have agreed to your request to subsidize that ridiculous relief home every year. Don't be willful anymore. I have become a level 3 alchemist in Vice Speaker Abel's laboratory. You don't need to worry about my affairs. What I am worried about is that if a large number of miners die in the iron mine, will it be easy for the Parliament to pass it? Avery shook his head. Believe me, Ivy, we give so much campaign funds to the Speaker and members of Parliament every year. If something happens to us, some of them are more anxious than us. My stupid sister, do you know how much it will cost to treat all the miners? The medical expenses for one person are even enough for us to hire 3 people. The charred body of the plague carrier Doolittle has been placed in the square. He will be described as the culprit of tuberculosis. The death of miners is not a big deal, but if this year's report is ugly, it will be a big deal. There are undercurrents in Fabro City. We must increase the activity funds this year. Where will these activity funds come from? Of course, it comes from the iron mine. In the next turmoil, our Thor family must make arrangements in advance, otherwise, we will not know how we died. Don't you know why Baron Hockham, who is over 60 years old, is trying so hard to get promoted recently? Everyone feels the pressure. You have talent, but don't be delayed by insignificant things. Go, don't worry about the iron mine anymore, go back to Fabro City, and be the assistant to Deputy Speaker Abel with peace of mind. 2 in 1, today is also a day for extra updates. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 168. In May, several cavalrymen rushed to several towns with Baron Hockham's call. The destination of one of the cavalrymen was the Jazz Castle in Lehman Town. After receiving the letter, Jennifer counted her team and prepared for Gassi Town. Her team was small, with the cavalry captain Archer, who was also the knight squire, 5 cavalrymen, and a maid of Jennifer. Jennifer did not bring all the cavalrymen, but only selected the 5 with the highest quality. When she was about to enter Gassi Town, Jennifer waited by the roadside. Soon, 2 cavalrymen came out from the small road. Archer opened his mask and was about to ask who the 2 were, but he soon saw the emblem of Jazz Jennifer's family on his breastplate. Is this the cavalry that Jazz said she had recruited in advance and had been preparing for Jazz in Gassi Town? Both of them were wearing masks, so Archer could not see their faces. After whispering a few words with Jazz, the 2 stood at the end of the team. Jennifer and others said, "In the future, when you enter the Baron's castle, don't talk too much and don't walk around. Don't go anywhere except the training ground and the place where you live. Don't listen to anyone's orders except me. You are my cavalry, not the Baron's cavalry." Level 1 Knight Jennifer, Knight Squire Archer, and 7 cavalry passed the drawbridge on the moat of the Baron's castle and entered the castle. Sir Harley and his son Hayden greeted Jennifer at the gate of the castle. Sir Harley looked a little unhappy. He saw that there was only 1 captain and 7 cavalry behind Jennifer. Jennifer explained, "The last time I went for promotion, my cavalry was lost. That was in October last year. It took 7 months to recruit cavalry again, and only these cavalry barely met the requirements." Sir Harley didn't say much, and led everyone into the castle. Hayden's cultivation was not as high as his father's, and he frowned and scanned these cavalry. Except for a knight squire, the other cavalry may not be as good as the cavalry guns that were recently eliminated in the Baron's castle. The Baron's castle is much more luxurious than the Sir's castle. Unlike the Sir's castle, which is surrounded by farms, the Baron's castle is a pure aristocratic castle. As soon as you enter the door, you will see a beautifully trimmed garden. At the end of the garden is the 4-story main building where the Baron's family lives. Behind and to the side of the main building are the training places for the cavalry. Sir Jennifer went to the castle to meet Baron Hockham. The Baron's attendants took the cavalry to the low houses next to the training ground. They lived in these 2-meter-high low houses. Archer noticed that the Sir specifically instructed the attendants to arrange a separate room for the 2 cavalrymen who joined halfway. During a training session, Jennifer stood at the edge of the training ground, watching the cavalrymen train, and next to her stood a cavalryman wearing a helmet. A dull voice came from the helmet, "How is Lehman Town now?" "Because of the appearance of the vampire traitor Vanya, the matter between you and Ivan is no longer the most concerned thing for the vampires. After you left, the Ravener family sent the level 3 vampire Hera, the high priest of the city's Red Church. The woman brought dozens of deacons and frantically searched for the traitor Vanya in Lehman Town. Then they will be disappointed. I think Vanya has fled far away." That said, but Rudolph felt heavy pressure when he heard about the level 3 vampires. Being watched by the level 3 apostles is not a good thing. He has already learned the witch language of the 3 fire signs. The important thing now is to find a way to become a level 3 wizard. In fact, this is one of the reasons why Rudolph agreed to Jennifer to participate in this operation. Baron Hockham dared to organize an action against the level 3 werewolves. This is an opportunity for Baron Hockham, and it may also be an opportunity for him, Rudolph. Jennifer continued. Indeed, the vampires made a big fuss, but they didn't find Vanya. It's as if Vanya has completely disappeared, and there is no trace of her at all. Wait a little longer, and after the vampires leave Lehman Town, you can come back, Rudolph. I will go back occasionally. There are too many people in Lehman Town who know Rudolph and Ivan, and they can't convince others, and they won't believe that a wizard and a werewolf are completely harmless. Rudolph asked again, "How is Baron Hockham going to find the level 3 werewolf?" "I have been in Gastown for a while, but I have never heard of the news of the level 3 werewolf, nor have I seen Baron Hockham looking for werewolves. I don't know about that. The Baron's castle has entered a state of war now, and we can only obey orders. It is normal to have casualties in war. I have to speculate Baron Hockham with the greatest malice. My grandfather died in Gastown in the battle following Hockham. What is the Baron's attitude towards you?" Jennifer had just attended a party last night. "It was a boring party," she said. "If we only talk about aristocratic etiquette, it is impeccable." At this moment, Hayden led 3 cavalrymen and suddenly walked towards Archer. Hayden is a few years older than Jennifer, about 25 years old, and is also a level 1 knight. He stood in front of Archer. "Let your cavalry assemble." Archie looked at Jennifer, and Jennifer nodded. She didn't know what her cousin Hayden was going to do. Rudolph left Jennifer and walked towards the team. There was only a peephole on the heavy helmet, so people could not see Rudolph's face. Hayden looked at the 7 cavalrymen who had gathered and shouted. The Baron issued a call for war. This is war, an endless war with werewolves. It's a battle of iron and blood. When the Baron gives the order to charge, if anyone dares to be slow for 1 second, I will chop off your head without hesitation. I am your executioner. Hayden glanced around. Next is the sparring session. You choose 3 people to sparring with my cavalry. Let me see your determination to fight. Jennifer came over at this time. Her soldier was so reprimanded by others, which made her look a little embarrassed. She understood that this was because she brought too few cavalry, which dissatisfied the Baron's castle. She looked at the cavalry, and after seeing Rudolph nodded slightly, she said, "Then let's practice sparring and see how strong the cavalry in the Baron castle is. Name 3 cavalrymen, one of whom is Rudolph." The 3 cavalrymen in Lemang Town all wore helmets, and the cavalrymen in Gastown opposite did not even wear helmets. This was a sign of contempt for the cavalryman in Lemang town. The cavalryman opposite Rudolf first made a sword stance and pointed the tip of his sword at Rudolf. Rudolf also learned to assume the same sword posture. The corners of the cavalry's lips raised slightly. Judging from the swinging sword tip, he was a novice. The cavalryman on the opposite side quickly stepped forward and swung his sword fiercely to Rudolf's side. The broadswords of both sides smashed together in the air. The cavalryman on the opposite side suddenly felt that the muscles in his arms were a little sore, which was a sign of sudden excessive exertion. This rookie could actually block one of his swings. He lunged quickly and attacked Rudolf again. Rudolf kept retreating, and every time he could only block with his sword. The posture of swinging the sword was also very unfamiliar, no different from swinging a stick. The cavalryman on the opposite side was Hayden's chosen leader and had a great advantage on the scene, but he always felt that something was wrong. During a certain swing, he had to raise his hand to block Rudolf's sword from above. Of course, this sword would be blocked. Rudolf suddenly stepped forward, without sheathing his sword, and directly struck with his elbow. This elbow hit the opposing cavalryman right on the underside of his arm. It was clearly separated by the chain mail, and it was obviously just a simple elbow strike, but the broadsword of the cavalryman on the opposite side was released. He wanted to lower his head and pick up his sword, but found that his arms were sore and trembling, and he couldn't even shake hands. For a moment, everyone around was extremely shocked. Experienced people have already seen that there is a huge difference in the cavalry skills between the two sides. The disadvantaged Lemang town cavalry accidentally hit the injured muscle of the Gasai town cavalry. With just a slight blow, the Gasai town cavalry lost its strength. Resistance. Rudolf smiled secretly in his helmet. His investigation this month was not fruitless. He knew the injuries of the cavalryman in front of him. For a period of time, the cavalryman had to rest for half a month due to a muscle strain under his upper arm. This is no small injury. Hayden frowned on the side. He really wanted his knights to go down and teach the Lehman Town cavalry a lesson. Even through his helmet, he could feel the Lehman Town cavalry laughing. Jennifer said, "Cousin Hayden, before the battle, the cavalry should be carefully inspected for hidden injuries. Unreasonable transitional training is not acceptable, and fighting for the Baron with injuries is even more unacceptable." Hayden said nothing, turned and left with the cavalry with an ugly face. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 169. A few nights later, a group of people came to the outside of the Baron's castle. The woman walking in front was wearing a one-line skirt with a long skirt tail. If Rudolf guessed correctly, this was the level 3 vampire Jennifer had mentioned, the High Priest Hera. Standing on the training ground in the distance, Rudolf was surprised that among this group of people, there was actually a witch hunter from the Judgment Bureau, the word Spirit Larry. He was an old acquaintance, and they had worked together in Lehman Town before. Why did these people come to the Baron's castle together? At a certain moment, Rudolf even felt that he was exposed. Soon, Rudolf learned from Jennifer that Baron Hockham relied on the vampires to find the level 3 werewolves. Jennifer's second cousin Henry, who died, had used the castle bat, which proved that Baron Hockham had a good relationship with the Ravno family. Rudolf frowned in his helmet. Why did the Red Priest Hera find the town of Gas? These vampires came and went, and then there was a rumor in Gas that the Red Church was looking for the traitor Vanya in Gas. Why didn't the people of the Ravno family look for Vanya in Lehman? In the Red Church in Gas, a deacon entered the hall. "High Priest, Baron Hockham has sent the information about Gas." A vampire handed a piece of parchment to Hera. "There are cheaper papers now, but the nobles still prefer to use parchment. Parchment represents a long history and noble status." Hera opened the parchment and read it carefully. During the days when Vanya was divined, many chaotic things happened in Gazay town. The parade of miners in Thor mining, The epidemic of tuberculosis, the suppression of miners, dozens of miners were fired from the iron mine, a fire broke out in Gazay town, and a plague carrier was burned to death. Hera frowned, most of them are related to Thor mining. Could it be that Vanya was involved in the Thor mining? The actions of the Blood clan will not stop because of the possibility of involving Thor mining. They sent a large number of people to investigate Gazay town and mobilized all the forces they could to find any clues. Sure enough, when a miner was asked about Vanya at the mine, he suddenly said, "Vanya, where did I hear it? Oh, I remember, isn't little Hadley's relative named Vanya? He also came to the mine to find Hadley." Someone next to him reminded, "That's not Hadley's relative, that's a volunteer at the orphanage." That night, Hadley appeared in the basement of the Red Church in Gazay town. When Hera walked into the basement, Hadley was already beaten to death. "You won't say a word." Hadley looked up and saw a beautiful woman, but he knew that these people were bad people. Unlike them, Mr. Vanya and Ms. Ivan were good people. It was absolutely impossible to get the news of Mr. Vanya and Ms. Ivan from him. Fortunately, the two of them had left the orphanage, otherwise they would be caught up by their enemies. Mr. Vanya took Hadley to see a doctor several times and also pulled him out of the basement of Thor mining. He would never betray Mr. Vanya now. Hadley's eyes were full of stubbornness. The vampire who whipped Hadley felt a little ashamed. He didn't do his job well. He didn't torture Vanya's whereabouts for several hours, so he had to let the high priest ask in person. The vampire picked up the whip again and whipped Hadley hard. Neither intimidation nor torture could pry open the young man's mouth. Hadley just stared at the ground, forcing himself to divert his attention. He recalled the big and small things in the past. On the night when he was picked up by the director of the orphanage, he drank mushroom soup for the first time. The soup was really delicious. During the 3 years he grew up in the orphanage, he was the oldest child, so he helped the director the most and gave the most to other children. Sometimes, the person who gives the most is the one who loves more. Hadley loves the orphanage very much, more than anyone else. Two kind people came to the orphanage. One was Miss Yvonne, who was the second best person in the world after the director. The other was Mr. Vanya. Although Mr. Vanya was not always in the orphanage, he was Hadley's idol. Although Mr. Vanya did not work much, he cured the terrible lung disease in the orphanage. Later, he got a job. He worked hard and tried to please everyone in the mine, just to make himself earn more. When he returned to the orphanage with his first month's salary, all the children looked at him with admiration. His dream was to make good money and become the director of the orphanage after retirement. He could feel that Mr. Vanya and Miss Yvonne really liked the orphanage, and they really didn't mind the dirty children in the orphanage. Therefore, Hadley would never say a word at this time. Hera had other means, but she couldn't use them at this time. "Take him away." The two blood servants dragged Hadley out. At this time, Ivy was standing in the Red Church with two followers. Unexpectedly, the real owner of the orphanage, Ivy of the Thor family, knew that the people in the orphanage were brought here at the first time. After seeing Hadley, Ivy first breathed a sigh of relief. It was good that he was not dead. She had a way to cure Hadley, this poor child who had suffered so much. After signaling the followers to take Hadley out of the church, Ivy stared at Hera. "High Priest Hera, you can't just take someone from the orphanage away just because of someone who might have the same name as you." Looking at Ivy's young and bookish face, Hera just said, "Miss Ivy, I think you should understand what Vanya means to the Ravno family. If that Vanya is really the blood clan traitor we are looking for, then he doesn't have any good intentions towards the orphanage. I didn't expect that the third lady of the Thor family would go to great lengths to ask for a child who had already left the orphanage." Although Ivy's face was childish, she was not as mature as Hera. She was beautiful, but still spoke loudly. "The children in the orphanage are not children without families. This is what I have repeatedly emphasized to them. Of course I will come. Unless you can produce new evidence, I hope this matter will end here. Hera stared at Ivy's eyes. So, how much do you know about Vanya who appeared in the orphanage? You can ask people who have seen Vanya and show them Vanya's portrait. I believe that no one will recognize the two as the same person. After Ivy left the Red Church, she saw the carriage waiting outside. Hadley had been put on the carriage. The owl was originally standing on the top of the carriage. The carriage under it began to move, and it also flapped its wings and flew away. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 170. Some apostles must challenge high-level apostles to be promoted. Knights must use guardian chains to fight against higher-level apostles, werewolves must bite high-level werewolves to death, and wizards are also the best at committing suicide. There is a reason why there are few wizards. Every time they are promoted, they have to frantically test the edge of death. Seeking high-level relics is extremely dangerous. Rudolph needs a level 3 relic, but he has few options. Sheriff Claude is a level 3 alchemist, so he is directly excluded. Miss Ivy is a level 3 alchemist, and it is not easy to attack, not because she is the third lady of the Thor family, but because she is an alchemist. Old Grey may be a level 3 zombie. Rudolph has a good relationship with Old Grey, and he may not be able to beat him. The Black Gold Guide, that old lady may be a level 3 wizard. Rudolph does not want to provoke the people who can take care of the Black Gold Institute in Fabreau City. Rudolph can attack either werewolves or vampires. Rudolph is ready to make preparations for both situations. As for the werewolves, this time he infiltrated Baron Hawkham's team just to find the level 3 werewolves. As for the vampires, Rudolph deliberately revealed a little flaw to see if he could attract the vampires. Of course, this flaw cannot be too big, and the vampires must spend more time to give Rudolph time to observe and collect intelligence. This is why Rudolph deliberately chose the pseudonym Vanya. Rudolph does not like to fight an unprepared battle. Since he has to die, he must be prepared. Die for the sake of doing, not for death. The level 3 vampires of the Ravno family are one of the potential targets. If the level 3 werewolves fail, then it is not impossible to consider luring Hera out, weakening the guards around her, and attacking her by force. After all, he has Vanya, and he is now very familiar with the intelligence about the level 3 vampire Hera, so he has the upper hand. The vampires are not good people either. I didn't expect them to arrest Hadley directly. Fortunately, Rudolph is now an organized person, and he doesn't need to deal with Hadley's affairs himself. At the critical moment, people in the organization can come forward. Ivy of the Rescue Society went to rescue Hadley, and she only needed to reveal her identity as the third lady of the Thor family. After closing the pet crystal, Rudolph stood on the wall of the Baron's castle and took a last look at the Red Church. Rudolph walked slowly under the wall. He avoided all the patrolling cavalry and walked to the house assigned to him and Yvonne. The vampires acted quickly and found him earlier than Rudolph expected, which slightly disrupted his plan. However, no plan is foolproof, and there will always be accidents. Rudolph needs to collect information first to know how the vampires found him. After lying on the bed, Rudolph began to carefully control the Red Church. In Gazay Town, the word Spirit Larry was rushing to a place with 2 vampires. They came to the area around the burned house of Dr. Doolittle. The last place where Vanya appeared was here. Hearing Larry's very certain divination results, the vampires began to look for other clues around. A minute later, a black cat appeared on the windowsill not far away, watching everything silently. Facing the word Spirit Larry, Rudolph did not dare to use the more convenient owl, but changed to the black cat he rarely used. If Larry still thought Rudolph was a wizard, then he should know that owls and sparrows have a certain connection with Rudolph. As for the black cat, it is more hidden in the dark. The black cat's tail swept back and forth, staring at everything coldly. At this time, Dr. Doolittle's clinic had turned into a ruin. Doolittle's clinic was also rented from someone else's house. The landlord had already considered himself unlucky at this time. It was impossible to hold the tenant Doolittle accountable. Doolittle's body would not compensate him. Therefore, the landlord cleaned up the ruins and prepared to rebuild a house. The Blood Clan did not find any clues around the half-new house. Rudolph did not believe that they could find any useful clues. Then, the group left here, and today's search seemed to be over. The black cat followed Larry and his companion slowly from behind, and Larry and the vampires returned to the Red Church together. After hesitating, the black cat did not rush into the Red Church. The black cat's eyes suddenly became smart and no longer so dull. It looked around, not knowing why it was here. Rudolph closed his eyes and wondered why Larry was here. The sheriff said that the Relief Association had helped suppress the Trial Bureau, and the Trial Bureau would not organize a witch hunt against him. So, did Wayne and others in the Trial Bureau not give up and want to investigate and hunt Rudolph privately? But why did they get involved with the vampires? Wayne and his companions could not mobilize the Trial Bureau, so they wanted to use the power of the vampires. Rudolph's guess was very close to the truth. In the Red Church, Larry was writing a letter to Wayne. He wrote everything about his cooperation with the vampires in the letter. After more than a month of fruitless work, he finally found Vanya's whereabouts again. What confuses Larry is that in the past month, Vanya seems to have completely disappeared. He wants Wayne to help find out what kind of ability can make a person completely disappear from this world. Wayne's team is embarrassed now. They were very excited when they heard that Rudolph, the patrol captain of Lehman Town, was indeed a wizard. Kevin and Ichabod are both dead. They all want to avenge them, at least for Ichabod. Kevin's judgment is right. Rudolph is indeed a wizard. Wayne immediately applied to organize a witch hunt, but their preparations were stopped by the top leaders before they even started. Wayne went to the director's office and had a big fight with him, but the result did not change. The director's explanation was also very tough. The wizard Rudolph had left Fabro City, so there was no need to hunt him. It was only necessary to notify the trial offices in other cities. The director said that the trial office was unwilling to waste energy on this matter. Wayne certainly would not give up, but he also knew that with only a few people in their team, it was impossible to complete the hunt for Rudolph. In the end, Wayne found a way to find someone to match him up with Hera, the high priest of the vampires. Vanderlyn, who had escaped from the wizard's hands, said that the wizard Rudolph had killed several vampires, and Wayne and Hera had a basis for cooperation. Hera used the power of the word spirit to hunt Vanya. And Wayne used the power of the vampires to hunt the wizard Rudolph. They each got what they needed and cooperated smoothly. However, the first month was not smooth. Neither the wizard Rudolph nor the vampire traitor Vanya was found. Now, Vanya has revealed his true colors. When they chased to Gazay town, Vanya disappeared again. The word spirit can only do divination once a day. The next night, Larry came to the backyard of the Red Church again to prepare for divination. Gazay town is more prosperous than Lehman town, so there are tall houses not far from the Red Church. On the chimney of a house, there stood a black cat. The black cat blended into the darkness behind it, motionless, staring at the Red Church. The word spirit's divination must be done in a place where the night sky can be seen. Therefore, Larry must be in the yard. A vampire came out from the back door of the Red Church. He stretched out his wrist, cut the wound, and let the blood flow into a shallow dish. The blood was sent to Larry, and Larry began to do divination with the blood. Rudolph stayed in the house, looking at the pet crystal in confusion. Then, These people got excited because Larry got a new result. Larry led the vampires and walked out of the city. Rudolph also knew their final destination. This was the place where he made the witch weapon plague sprayer for the last time, and it was also the place where he met Vanya. Rudolph thought again and again. If Larry could predict himself, the vampires would have rushed into the Baron's castle by now, which was not very likely. So, Larry predicted Vanya. This also matches the time when the vampires came to Gazay town. When fighting Doolittle, Vanya came out of the star map and revealed his flaws. The power of the word spirit is really annoying. When Larry was predicting, the item used for divination was the blood of the strange vampire. So, what was special about the blood of the vampire who gave Larry blood? Rudolph suddenly thought of a word, blood descendant. Could that vampire be Vanya's blood descendant father? Can the blood of that vampire be used to predict the whereabouts of the blood descendant? Rudolph's frown relaxed. That vampire, Vanya's blood father, was the one Rudolph had to kill. Weird Star Witch. Author, White Silver Black Iron. Chapter 171. One early morning in June, the gate to the Baron's castle opened. Nearly 100 cavalry, led by nobles, left the castle. In addition to the cavalry, there are about 150 servants to serve the cavalry. A level 1 knight can gather the ultimate strength of up to 10 cavalry. There are 30 level 2 knights, and about 100 level 3 knights. If Baron Hackham wants to be promoted to level 3 knight, he needs more than 30, but no more than 100, cavalry. The wealthy Baron Castle chose to train cavalry at the upper limit. These cavalry will turn into the Baron's ultimate strength on the battlefield. This huge team passed through the town of Gasser, with silent people on both sides of the street. The Baron is going to hunt in the wild. After the hunting, the Baron will become a level 3 knight. This is the saying in the castle. Walking at the front was the second level knight, Baron Harkham. Behind him were 3 first-level knights, Sir Harley, Harley's eldest son Hayden, and Jennifer. Rudolph did not see the vampire guides in the team. It was estimated that the 2 vampire guides would catch up with the team at night and they would not be able to move during the day. The 2 vampire guides will search for level 3 werewolves for Baron Hakim. As an ally, Baron Hakim is also mobilizing all the power he has left in the town to help the Red Church find Vanya. Larry the word spirit found traces of Vanya, once in the Doolittle Clinic and once in the suburbs. Nothing else to gain. As for the person named Vanya who appeared in the workhouse, it could only be investigated privately, and the clues were quickly cut off by Thor Mining Company. Hera, the high priest, could not force Thor Mining Company to do things. The Toll family is one of the richest families in Fabreau City and the main body of mineral development in Fabreau City. Part of the reason why we have been able to hold on to the fat piece of iron ore is that not all the shares of Thor Mining Company are in the hands of the Thor family. At least the Speaker and Deputy Speaker hold shares of Thor Mining. Now that the iron mines in Fabreau City are close to being mined, the Toll family has not declined, but has just moved their mining company to other places. Not only in the city of Fabreau, but also in the county town of Vichy, the Thor family is not considered a small family. In all levels of parliament in Vichy County, there are alchemist deputies who support the Thor family, or in other words, there are alchemist deputies who support the Thor family. In addition, the workhouse nurse named Vanya had been active during the day many times, and the investigation against him was quickly suspended. The search for Vanya progressed slowly again, and one day, Larry took the initiative to enter the Red Church. "Dear High Priest Ms. Hera, I have some suggestions that I would like to discuss with you." Hera turned her head and motioned to Larry behind her to continue. Larry said, "Our search for Vanya was interrupted time and time again. I thought I was going in the wrong direction. From any point of view, Vanya was just an extremely ordinary vampire before. It is impossible for him to have such an ability to avoid being hunted by the vampires and avoid my divination. Mr. Pulley, the former priest of Lehmantown, reported to your family about Vanya. Vanya was supposed to die in the hunt for the mutant werewolf, but he didn't. It was impossible for the werewolf to help Vanya, but Vanya came into contact with a wizard, Rudolph, during that operation. He was put back by the wizard Rudolph, which was weird. I think that wizard is the key to changing Vanya. Vanya can become a level 2 vampire without sleeping in an ancient coffin, can kill the former priests Pulley and Vanderlyn, and can still evade our pursuit. Everything is so incredible. This is not Vanya's ability, he cannot have such ability. If the wizard Rudolph is involved, everything makes sense. Wizards always have amazing abilities. Only a wizard can help Vanya do all this. Hera turned completely and looked at Larry. Larry continued, I said all this not simply because I want the vampires to help us hunt witches, but because I made the final judgment after eliminating all possibilities. The blood traitor Vanya must have some kind of connection with the wizard Rudolph. If we keep targeting Vanya, we're falling into Rudolph's trap. Therefore, finding the wizard Rudolph is more likely to find the vampire traitor Vanya. Hera's chest rose slightly, and more of her chest was exposed in the one-line skirt. The fruitless pursuit for several days made Hera very irritated. At this time, she heard another possibility, and her heart moved. After Larry was in a daze for a moment, he moved his eyes, lowered his head and continued. So we can simplify things a little bit. Find the wizard Rudolph first, and then the vampire traitor Vanya. The wizard Rudolph is always with the mutant werewolf Ivan. The two of them acted together when they were at the Lehmantown police station, and later escaped together. Therefore, we can first find the mutant werewolf Ivan. Ivan has white hair, a beautiful face, and can completely suppress her animal nature. She looks harmless to humans and animals. Anyone who sees her will be deeply impressed by her. After saying that, Larry took out an envelope that Wayne had just mailed to him. After opening the envelope, inside was Yvonne's file when she entered the police station. There is a blurry black and white photo in the file. The camera in Lehmantown is the oldest silver plate camera. The photo can only roughly identify the facial features. Yvonne's white hair is almost the same color as the background in the photo, so it is difficult to distinguish, but her facial features are still as delicate. Ms. Hera, we should use the weakest of the three criminals as a breakthrough, so that we can quickly arrest them. Hera stretched out her jade-like fingers and took the photo. Okay, witch hunters are professionals in this area, and I trust your judgment. Hera didn't want to be led by the judgment office, but now she had no good solution. Soon, the investigation team adjusted its direction and began to look for the white-haired young woman. A white-haired woman suddenly appeared in Gastown, and soon many clues emerged, and the clues were still gathered in the almshouse. A volunteer appeared in the almshouse. He was gentle, kind, and most importantly, he had white hair. However, the white-haired volunteer left the almshouse after working in the almshouse for more than a month. In terms of time, the white-haired volunteers left just after the pneumonia epidemic and before the Baron issued the call-up order. If Rudolph knew what Larry had inferred, he would regret it. Their first escape, coupled with the protection of the Relief Society, left them full of loopholes. Gastown was just a temporary stop for Rudolph. He deliberately left too many traps, and he was quickly targeted. At this time, Rudolph and Yvonne were following the cavalry team towards the increasingly remote hilly areas. The cavalry team walked farther and farther, encountering several level 2 werewolf tribes in the process. They defeated those tribes without any pressure. After that, they rarely encountered werewolves. It seemed that the werewolves also knew that a huge cavalry team appeared in the wilderness. It's a race against time. Will Rudolph become a level 3 wizard first, or will the vampire find Rudolph first? The party that lags behind will suffer heavy losses.